Well, at least at this point, I think we all know that Final Fantasy IX Remake is at least real. When you're looking at the Nvidia leak listing, the Epic database leak from last year, the rumors that Square Enix originally had this project outsourced before bringing it back in-house, which is honestly, and I hate to say it, on brand for Square Enix. I mean, when you have all of these rumors for the same game every single year from industry insiders claiming that this project is in fact real, I think at this point you'd be very hard pressed to say that all of this is just a coincidence. Not to mention the 25th anniversary that was made just a couple weeks ago, months before the actual anniversary date in July. Hell, even Square Enix knows that the fans want this game so much that they're teasing us on Twitter, giving us quotes from the game of Final Fantasy IX of all games because, well, obviously they have something planned this year. They didn't do this with Final Fantasy VIII, obviously, because they didn't have anything to reveal. But of course, they made a big deal out of the Final Fantasy VII 25th anniversary, and why would they do that? Well, it's because they had something big planned for it, of course, that being Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. So because there is so much 9 talk right now, because the 25th anniversary is right around the corner, I thought now was the perfect time to talk about what I personally want to see from this potential remake. What I think we should see in order to get a remake that, you know, both old and new fans will be satisfied with. So do not forget to like the video and subscribe to keep up to date with anything gaming or JRPG related in the future. So let's get into it. The game should absolutely be turn-based. Now listen, I am someone who loves modern Final Fantasy. I love the action. Both Final Fantasy VII Rebirth and Final Fantasy XVI have some of my favorite combat in the series. In general, I would say I'm someone who's a really big fan of action games, of strategic action games. It really doesn't matter which type of action game you put in front of me. As long as it's an action game, I will play it. But I do think that for a potential Final Fantasy IX remake, it should absolutely try to be as one-to-one as possible, not go the Final Fantasy VII remake route where everything is pretty much a reimagining, right? I mean, everything in that game is pretty much a reimagining from the original when you're talking about the story to the gameplay, how certain sections of the game play out. You know, it's just not one of those remakes that follow the original one-to-one, right? And if the rumors are to be believed that this is supposed to be a smaller scale project, something that is nowhere near as big as the 7 remake games, right? This could be a remake that follows more in line with something like Trials of Mana. So not only will adapting the gameplay from the original work very well for older fans of the series, people who want to see turn-based back in the series again, but also for newer fans of the series who are probably getting into these games for the first time or maybe returning, it'll get a good chunk of them to try this game out, this remake out, because of, you know, the hype that this game is going to bring. And maybe they'll play it and be like, okay, I like this, I want to go back and play the other game, the older games in the series. This game could be a great reintroduction to turn-based for old and new fans, and maybe that could give Square Enix the push to finally be like, okay, let's experiment with this gameplay in the future. I think if anything, this should be one thing that absolutely happens. Maybe they can compromise. Square Enix doesn't have to bring turn-based over to the mainline games. Maybe instead they can make a separate series, a legacy series for specifically turn-based games for Final Fantasy, while the mainline games remain untouched, still retaining the creative freedom to do pretty much whatever they want with those games. But to see this 9 remake retain its original gameplay with the obvious tweaks and innovations, I think this is something that absolutely should happen. Now, next up is to have an unfixed camera in towns. Of course, we all know that the older games all had fixed camera angles. You couldn't look around at your surroundings and really get that sense of scale. And even if you could, there really wouldn't be any reason to, as pretty much everything in the game are static backgrounds. This is exactly why I would love to see an unfixed camera, a camera that you could freely move around. It's that sense of freedom, that sense of scale and immersion that really puts you into your environment. You know, I think of the first time I played played Final Fantasy VII Remake. When you get out of the train into the Sector 7 slums and you're able to free roam, able to freely move your camera around. I cannot tell you the sense of wonder, the sense of scale, how emotional I felt to see Midgar in this type of presentation for the first time. To be able to just look up and see Alexandria Castle in all of its glory at that type of scale. Even to look at angles and places that we never could have seen in the original due to its restricted camera. This is something that I would love to see. To have an unfixed camera in towns and key locations. This would do so much to immerse you even more into these environments. A feeling these older games can only convey so much with a restricted camera. Now, speaking of gameplay, I think that in addition to retaining that core gameplay identity of turn-based, I do think it would be very interesting to implement real-time commands. You see, the thing that interests me the most when it comes to combat in games isn't necessarily getting something completely brand new. It's not even getting a very popular combat system, a very familiar combat system from a past game into a brand new entry. What tends to interest me the most is when we get innovation to combat systems that are already so well established within the medium, that try to break free from the mold of what every other game has done before it. When you look at games like Expedition 33 that are really trying to do something different, innovate on the turn-based formula. Obviously, it's taken inspiration from so many other popular, well-renowned JRPG games, but there is still so much uniqueness to Expedition 33 that we have not seen. It is trying to provide something new, give us a combat system that is beloved by fans. A combat system that, while very much alive, has pretty much taken a backseat in favor to other gameplay genres on the market. Final Fantasy IX Remake is yet another opportunity for this. Another opportunity to not only give fans classic turn-based gameplay, but to be able to experiment with this gameplay genre. Innovate on it in a way that can pull in both old and new fans. To bring in those fans who maybe just don't like turn-based at all. Provide those mechanics that will please both action and turn-based fans. It is that type of innovation that I love seeing for these type of combat systems. The type of innovation I would love to see if Final Fantasy ever went back to experimenting with turn-based. I would honestly much rather have that than if they just copy and pasted turn-based from the older games. I want to see some innovation. Now, the last thing I would love to see here is certain characters getting more screen time. Don't get me wrong, Final Fantasy IX has some incredible characters, some really great character writing too, but it does fall victim to what a lot of JRPGs fall victim to, and that's the fact that they have so many characters that they just don't know what to do with them at times. I think characters like Amarant, Quina, and Freya are pretty much the biggest outliers here. Freya a little less so. To me, I think Freya's character starts off really strong in the beginning. A Dragoon Knight who wanders the land looking for her lost love. We learn more about her and her home in Burmecia, and later she even finds her lost love for a brief moment. But her character kind of takes a back seat for most of the game after that. Well, until the very end where she does find her lost love, and that's pretty much it. Her character really doesn't get explored outside of that. And the same goes for Quina and Amarant. They're pretty much characters that are just there, right? And I think that, you know, these three characters, along with pretty much everybody in the party, can have their characterization bolstered by a remake. I mean, just look at Final Fantasy VII Remake. Not only do the characters retain their characterization from the original, but I would say they are even better in the remake because we get to explore so much more about their characters. We get to see so much nuance and different sides of these characters that we just couldn't see, that wasn't possible in the original. That is something that I think the Final Fantasy IX Remake has the potential for. Explore these characters further, what shapes them as people. Put us in their perspective, tell us the story in their eyes more than just the main protagonist. I want to feel like I am connected to all of these characters in the party, not just a select few. That is the one thing that I think the Final Fantasy VII Remake gets perfectly, and I think that this remake can too. You know, even if they do have this remake just be a complete one-for-one copy and paste, just make everything look prettier type of remake, you know, at the end of the day, I will still be happy, but I think there is just so much room for improvement, so much room for greatness that honestly I feel a lot of people will end up preferring a remake like this over something like the more ambitious 7 remake. Something that isn't a, you know, a complete reimagining of a game, but more along the lines of a remake like Resident Evil 2 or 4, right? Where it isn't necessarily changing much, especially within the story and how events unfold, but it is a significant jump in terms of how the game looks and how it plays, and even, you know, in the smaller details, and giving us new mechanics and just making the gameplay feel that much more improved. So with that said, tell me what you guys would personally want to see from a Final Fantasy IX remake. Give me a list, tell me in full detail. And with all of that said, I will catch you guys in the next one.